Hello, and here we are at Lesson 5. And today we are going to talk about an interesting topic, and that is the language in the solution paper. We often think of the solution paper as something really technical. However, using good language will help you a lot in your solution paper. So, let's revisit the aim of our solution paper. First of all, through our solution paper, we want to document and demonstrate the process in which we construct our model. Next, we also want to use the solution paper as a place where we logically justify each step of our model construction process and tell the readers why it makes sense. Next, we also want the solution paper to include proof that your model would yield valid results. And finally, your solution paper is also in a way argumentative, since another important aim of it is that you need to convince the audience that your model is a useful model and therefore they should adopt it. Now, let's look at the vocabulary of our solution paper. So, inside the solution paper, we prioritize the accuracy of our word choices. And therefore, instead of using fancy words, we want the words that best accomplish the job. And since the solution paper is a relatively objective piece, we should avoid subjective vocabulary, such as many of these unnecessary adjectives and adverbs. Finally, in a normal math model, you'll be encountering two fields, one of it being mathematics, another of it being the field you're modeling. And you should pay attention to domain-specific vocabulary and definitions of these fields so that you do not make wrong word choices. And I have an interesting example to illustrate it. For example, the word weight. In daily life, we just use it to talk about how heavy or light something is, basically the same thing as mass. However, in physics, weight normally refers to gravitational force. And in mathematics, weight is often what we consider as a coefficient we use to adjust for the importance of a value. For example, we can use weight in an average to adjust the importance of the different components. And this is one example of different definitions in different fields. Now, let's look at the phrasing and sentence structure part. The first important thing is that normally you should always write in paragraphs, meaning you should not bullet point all the time. And there's only two exceptions. One in assumptions and justification, where you can just list everything down. And finally, in strengths and weaknesses, where you can have bullet points, but essentially a full paragraph after each bullet point. And when you're describing procedures, you should use sentences that begin with we, which is we do what, or you can use passive voice. Do not use imperatives. And you should use varied sentence structure because it makes your paper more interesting, but they have to be clear. Transition phrases are often very helpful for you to improve the logical flow so that people can understand your paper better. Finally, another part is that since mathematics is the way you use to build your model, you should use your language and phrasing to show that you can translate math back into language and describe it well. Finally, if you have materials that will be logically confusing, you should consider using visualization, which we will talk about in a future video. Last but not least, let's talk about some very important things. That is labeling and references. We should label all assumptions, figures, tables, and equations. So, why? Because this allows us to better reference these things in the text. And thus, we can refer to each of the assumptions, figures, table, or equation by their label. The label is just a numerical thing. And next, some really important thing and a really common mistake is that we should not let our figures, tables, or equations be floating around in the text. They should be integrated into the text. They should be part of the text. And they should flow well into the text. Which means that we should refer to them and briefly describe them in the text. And for figures and tables, we need a caption. And one example will be like this. For example, in the text we might say, we sampled 5 squirrels and counted the number of nuts they collected. The results are shown in figure 2. And then, when you have the figure, you show the figure, and then you put a label on it, figure 2, and have a short caption. And that's about it about the language of the paper. Thank you for listening.